Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Woman in the Wall, Season 1, Episode 2. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the beginning of the episode. We finally learn about the name of the woman in the wall. Her name is Aoife, which, looking at that name, my immediate thing was Alfie? That I thought was like a different spelling of Alfie. I would have never gotten Aoife. It's just kind of like I think I've kind of learned that about Irish names. Like once again, the best example I always use is Saoirse Ronan. Looking at her name, I can see how you get Saoirse from it, but I would have never pronounced that Saoirse Ronan. But you know, that's how you properly pronounce it. So it's just one of those things. I would have never gotten Aoife out of that, but I'm like I can see where you kind of got it. But like I said, I would have thought like Alfie as in like Alfie. I thought that was just another like spelling of it. Either way, tinges and all that aside, she finally finds out the name of the woman on the wall, and she's in her wall, and she's. I was like, yeah, you got to be careful about that because you can't pick up the phone, and I'm like, you also want to be careful when you text too because you want to make sure you're texting like the person, which I think is neat because when Aoife first got in contact with her, it's like, right, the phone might not be safe, so she just kind of used that same response. But sadly, the phone is dead afterwards. So it's like, cool, got to go track down a charger for this very specific phone. It's like, that is a hassle. Then she's also got to juggle with the fact is that Massey and Akandi are looking for surveillance footage about the burning car from last episode. So who did it? Obviously, they went to visit one guy because he has a farm nearby and he puts it on Amy, which I'm wondering why. Because we saw Amy was in her store. Because she saw Lorna that night / morning because it was like 3 a.m. So she saw her, but it's low, and we saw she was clearly inside. So why does this guy? It seems like because even later on when Massey and Akandi like questioned her, she was like, "It was so and so who did it." It's like she knew exactly who it was. I'm like, what is their history? Because even Massey knows their history enough to be like, all right, that's some BS. Because he knows there's something there, but he won't really get into it. I'm wondering, is he like the baby daddy? Because that's the biggest question we have about a lot of the mommy and baby situation. Like, we don't know who a lot of the dads are. We might know who Lorna's baby daddy is, the father of her child. We'll get to that later, but we don't know about Amy or Clements, for example. So it could be a situation of maybe there's some like history there because he was like the baby daddy, but he never wants to take responsibility. So Amy has beef with him, and he turned that around on her. Like, or maybe because like I said, we saw in the previous episode she has some marks, so she maybe got into trouble from time to time. She's had a troubled history. Once again, everyone's had troubled history considering everything that they went through because of the Magdalene laundries and stuff. So, but either way, going back really quickly to what I was saying, like we never got a resolution to that. Like the fact is, he called out Amy. Amy knew specifically him that threw her under the bus, even though we clearly know she had nothing to do with it. So it's like, did he even see anything? I mean, he must have saw a woman, and he just must have assumed it was Amy. Because it's like, how? But that's like, I mean, I guess from like far away, you could probably mistake Lorna and Amy. Dark brown hair. Like I think you'd probably be able to like do that, but I don't know. Why specifically Amy? That's like the $1,000,000 question. Maybe we'll get into that more in a future episode. But obviously, and really quickly staying on Amy, she makes sure not to rat on Lorna because she's got no love. She doesn't care. Like, oh, burn that car. Like, good. She probably thinks maybe it had something to do with the priest's death, and she's perfectly fine with that. She made it clear, like she made it perfectly clear last episode. She was happy the mother effer was dead, and she wishes it was slower. So she made it clear to Lorna too, like, oh, I saw what you did, but don't worry, mommy's got each other's back. But Lorna doesn't really push too much on that. I guess she doesn't realize. To be fair, she was in her sleepwalking state, so she doesn't recognize that. I don't even know because Amy saw her, but in her sleepwalking state, did Lorna see Amy? That's a big question too, but she might not have even noticed that Amy was there. Like her sleep consciousness self was probably just focused on burning that car. That's probably all she focused on. So everything else kind of like disappeared to the background. So because the Amy of it all, I keep circling back to it. I meant to kind of move away, but it's relevant in so many regards to the episode because during that conversation with Massey and Akandi, she had made this point of like, because he was like, oh, like, are you, because Akandi was making a point like, oh, I'm not on anyone's side in this situation, because she's like, oh, really? Like, you were close to that priest, weren't you? Yeah, because she's like, the moment I said I was happy Father Percy was dead, you kind of had a look on your face, and just Coleman doesn't really answer her, but he walks away. But she knows, like, right, are you really here for the victims like us? Or are you more so here to kind of help cover up what's already been covered up? You have a vested interest in the priest, which there might be even a sordid history there. Once again, it's unclear and really hard to say, because it's like, once again, the organization that is the church has so many damn skeletons in the closet, and we don't know if this is the only skeleton that Percy had in his closet, because there's stuff with Akandi later on that I'm like, because it seemed like he was running, but it's like an older version of him, but he's in like some pajamas like maybe he would have worn as a kid or whatever, and he's running, and it looked like it was Father Percy after him. So I'm like, did Father Percy do something to you when you were a child? So is the Magdalene laundry the only like stain against him, or does he have other stains? It's like, yeah, if you're a shitty person in one capacity, there's a good chance you're going to be a shitty person in other capacities of your life. So part of me, because that cop, one of the cops, like in the last episode, he made an offhand reference of, well, he was a priest, and then Coleman immediately was like, what do you mean by that? Like, he got really defensive about that. Like, obviously he has a connection to the priest. It's like, yo, don't allocate him in that way, but maybe he has some deep-seated trauma, because we see later on in the episode he has a panic attack. So, and he had that moment like where it almost felt like confined spaces kind of bother him. I don't know if he's necessarily claustrophobic, because when he was like going down the alleyway or whatever, that's when it kind of kicked in, and he had, maybe it's like a nightmare or a dream or like some association where like he has to kind of run after he's running away from somebody. So, and like I said, I think that's Father Percy, but maybe not. But I'm like, I could easily see it being a thing of he has some very repressed stuff that's going to come to the surface. It isn't just other people's, for lack of a better term, dirty laundry that's coming to the surface. Even some of his trauma and pains coming to the surface as well, along with all these other women who've had their own complicated relationship with some priests and nuns. People of the cloth, rather, in general, but ultimately, Lorna gave herself a little bit of time, because she was able to not destroy the footage. She just like poured coffee on the CPU and kind of ruined any chance of them getting any footage, because she was there when Massey and Akandi were like going to look through the footage. So, which we do see at the end of the episode. Eventually, they do get it. Akandi can see it, but like there is not enough. It's too low quality. You can't make out Lorna's face at all. You can get up the shape and her hair, so he can put it together. Okay, the woman that Dara referenced, this is her. We've come across someone that looks like they could fit that bill in Lorna's case, but they don't have enough proof. He'll have it in the back of his mind, like, I'll suspect Lorna, but the surveillance footage isn't enough. But you can lie your way through it by being like, yeah, we had the surveillance footage. It's clearly you trying to paint her in a corner, so she might not realize like how like low quality that the camera footage is, that you can't zoom in enough to see her face, because even if you zoom in, once again, it's extremely pixelated. There's not enough details to clearly be like, hey, that's Lorna. It's too low quality. So they could still get used against her. Like, they can kind of entrap her by making her admit to something, even though they don't have evidence to prove. Like, they could lie and manipulate her. So that's still a possibility. We'll see if that ends up being the route that they go. But circling back, since I referenced Dara, Lorna set up a meet with Dara. He's thinking he's meeting with Aoife, and we also find out their relationship. It's their husband and wife. Now, what I thought was so interesting, too, is we find out that Dara and Aoife have a child, a daughter, which I'm immediately like, could that end up being Lorna's child? I don't know if because they never specify what child she had, because I think even Lorna doesn't know, which that led to a whole heartbreaking scene at the end of the episode, but we'll get to that. But I don't think even Laura knows, because they keep referring to it as her child, their children, never saying like, oh, my son or my daughter. Like, I don't think even Lorna knows like what kind of child she had, understandably so. But like I said, we'll get to that soon enough, those details. But the moment they introduced it, I'm like, well, we know Aoife worked at the Magdalene Laundry, and she was part of the mom and baby element of it as well. So the last person we saw with Lorna's baby was Aoife. So she could have, and because that was my big thing of, well, the baby might not be dead. It could be a thing of the baby's out there, and why Aoife out of anybody has that information. For one, she ended up having a conscience about it. We'll get to that soon enough. But also, like, it could just be like, no, I took your baby and I raised it as my own because I've been consumed by this guilt of stripping you away from your mother, and I'm trying to fill that role, but being surrounded by this baby just brought, especially with this once again in the news again. I think that's what really sparked it, because only for the past 2 years has it really, really like bubble to the surface in the general public news, because it ends up being this line from Massey, which I thought was so interesting, of you say like everyone knew but no one knew. So it's like it's kind of this vague thing of like everyone was kind of on board but they didn't really know the details of it, because truth be told is no one wanted to know the details. They knew this was going on but no one knew what was going on because they didn't care to know. They didn't want to know. Nobody wanted to get in the middle of that. Maybe it's like they didn't want to suffer some repercussions that maybe their own child would get dragged into this. So maybe that's the justification, or it's just such a big unspoken thing that just no one wanted to fight against. Who knows why so many people stayed silent and remained silent even present day. But circling back, luckily Lorna had the wherewithal to lie and say she had a different name. I almost expected her to use Clemenson's name, but luckily she just used the name Grace. Good thing she didn't use the name Clements, because that's the name that Aoife and her husband were looking into Clements. And I was like, wait, were you looking for Clements and accidentally went to Lorna? But I'm like, no. The letter Lorna got was directly sent to her. So you were looking for both of you, because at least in the confines of this story, because that's interesting too, because it's like, it doesn't involve Amy, even though she had a baby taken from her as well, because those are the only three we've gotten so far in the story. The other two women that are part of this group are from an older generation, and they weren't there under the same circumstances as our trio of Amy, Lorna, and Clements. So they were there for other reasons, but they are all the same. But like the fact is, it's specifically Clements and Lorna that Aoife is reaching out to, must mean like maybe she doesn't know anything about Amy's baby situation, or maybe there's going to be a sad, tragic element to that. But I think Clements and Aoife, I think Clements is going to end up having a really sad story too, hence why the ending is what it is. But the ending of the episode is what it is, but I think Lorna might be the only one that's in a position to have gotten her baby back, because I think Aoife might have taken her baby. Once again, that just pure speculation on my part, just because they introduced the fact is that Aoife and Dara have a child. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. That could just be legitimately their child, but I just think the connectivity of it all. I mean, it could be being a mother, because we have no idea how old their child is. Their child could be like a teenager or a young adult, but probably a lot of that with all this coming into the news makes you feel guilty. But that could also be guilt upon, hey, you're someone else's child that I took away. I don't know, because we find out that Dara never completed her quote-unquote training. She never officially became a sister. Not Dara. Aoife never officially became a sister, so is it because it seems like, right, she wasn't cut out for the job, as Sister Eileen kind of puts it. So the question then becomes, did she steal the baby on her way out and no one was the wiser about it? Or is it because she took, what did she, did she just bail on the situation and just couldn't handle what she was a part of? Because she was there for a little while. They said she was there from 83 to 87. So she was there for 4 years. So did that 4 years finally weigh down on her? Or did she only get there was it only her last year or two that she was at the Magdalene Laundries or whatever, and that's when she experienced stuff? Or was she experiencing that her entire time in the sisterhood, as part of as a nun, part of the church? I don't know. Obviously Massey and Akandi find Dara because they had the surveillance footage from Father Percy's car, so they stole it. So it wasn't even Lorna who stole it. Which once again goes back to my point that I think I strongly believe she hasn't killed anyone. Yes, she's had some out of pocket behavior because of her sleepwalking, because it's a symptom of her trauma bubbling to the surface, manifesting that way. But I don't think she killed Aoife. It's interesting because Dara tried to take the fall for the murder, but he's like, all right, we didn't do anything. He really didn't get too much into it. He was just saying, like, Aoife didn't do anything. She went to go talk to the guy. So either she accidentally killed him, it was an accident, or he was already dead when she went to go speak to him. But why steal the car? Like, why would you be driving his car? Like, that's what I don't understand. So there's something on that part, but it's interesting considering, like, well, if Aoife had nothing to do with that murder, ironically enough, you have Lorna having nothing to do with Aoife's murder, so. Like, Dar just never answered enough for me in that regard, because there's obviously only so much he wants to answer. He wants to bring up, like, hey, Aoife's missing, and if they want any information, they're going to have to find out from Aoife about everything, what she knew, because maybe we're kind of, I was about to say, oh God, what's that TV show that's based on a real story? It was on HBO. What was it? The Landscapers? I was wondering if it was going to be kind of a similar circumstance to that. If you've seen the show, or if like you know that story. I don't even remember the couple's name now, but it was a great 4-episode little mini series. It was based on a true story about a couple. I'm going on tangents. I highly recommend, if you don't know the story, or look into it and watch the show if you want to. But I'm so curious to see what that storyline ends up being, the whole Dara and Aoife of it all. And it's just kind of sad because Aoife's dead, and we won't really get any answers until Lorna's able to fill in some of those blanks of her memory, so. But because she found out about, okay, so you went to visit Clemens, you were looking for Clemens, so she wants to talk to Clemens, but Clemens' brother kind of stops her and is like, oh, you know what you did? You've already put my sister through enough. I'm like, what happened between them? Because now in retrospect, it made me go, especially the way Clemens was around Lorna. They ran into each other a few times this episode. First was at the store and they were awkward around each other. And then later on when they were showing up at that meeting, which is also sad too, because it's like, oh yeah, isn't the lady who puts the thing together, she's like, oh, isn't this great? And Lorna's like, yeah, we used to do this place's laundry at the Magdalene Laundry. And she's like, really? She's like, shit. It's like, yeah, that sucks. You picked a place that is associated with their trauma, because even Clemens is looking up at the building like, fuck. It's like that was a big whoopsie daisy. She just didn't do enough of her research, or I guess it never got to the specific points of anyone's story whose sheets and laundry they were actually doing. I guess it's such a minute detail you wouldn't think about it, but it's like, considering what that place represented and what they were forced to do and how they were treated along with what they were forced to do. Probably a detail you probably should have looked into, but to be fair, even last episode I would have never, because I didn't think about the fact is the laundry aspect of it is because it legitimately was them doing laundry. It was them doing sheets and stuff like that, on top of the actual physical and mental and emotional abuse they were being put under. Once again, they were treated in indentured servitude. So, but it was all for the betterment of making them quote unquote better women and better mothers and yada yada, so on and so forth. But the way Clemens was acting around her, I'm like, what happened? Because I was also thinking back to episode 1, because Clemens was like, yeah, what if we tell people our stories and they call us liars? And she looked at Lorna and I was like, what the hell was that about? I didn't think too much of it, because I was like, I'm sure there are, because the church won't acknowledge the Magdalene laundries, so they're being considered liars regardless. But her specifically looking at Lorna while she said that, and now we find out why. Clemens and Lorna had a plan to sneak their babies out and run away with them, but Sister Eileen figured it out that they were up to something and confronted Lorna, and it's like, hey, tell me what you and Clemens were doing. And it's just like, then you get into why Sister Eileen is garbage. I mean, anyone associated with this is garbage anyway. But the fact is that she manipulated her, saying this isn't a prison. There's no locks on these doors. You could leave at any time. But where would we go? Who would want you? You're a sinner. It's like you're making them feel like this is all they have, because let's not forget, your families, a lot of the people here, especially in Lorna's case, I'd assume maybe the same's true in Clement's and Amy's circumstances. It doesn't have to be, but we definitely know in Lorna's circumstance, her family shipped her off here. Some of the women were shipped here because of their family. Other people were probably just taken in naturally by the Magdalene Laundries, but it could be most. It could be a thing of, no, most of the people that were sent here were sent by their own parents. It probably could be. But yeah, like Lorna was saying all of that, and we find out the truth about what happened. Sister Eileen's like, tell me what you and Clements are up to. If you do, I will let you walk out of here with your baby. And you're like, damn it, dude, manipulated her. So she betrayed a fellow mother and friend, and that's why they're kind of awkward around each other, because like they were having a budding friendship, especially because a few scenes earlier, like a scene or two earlier, Amy said, hey, we're mothers, we got to stick together. And now it's like you find out like, right. I mean, and she was a teenager. She was scared. She was trying to get her baby, and she wanted to leave. And then Sister Eileen did the garbage thing, which we got at the end of the episode, the most heartbreaking thing of, well, go ahead and pick up your baby. And she's like, which one's my baby? It's like, you don't know? What kind of mother are you? Because if I remember correctly, and do correct me if I'm wrong, she didn't even get a few seconds with her baby. She got no time with her baby, because I think the moment her baby was born, it was already in Aoife's hands, and Aoife was leaving with the baby. I don't think she even got a chance to hold her baby. And it's just, but Eileen using that as a thing of like, oh, you don't even know? Even if she did have her baby, she only had it for like maybe a few seconds at most, if at all. Like I said, I strongly feel like I remember it being like already in Aoife's hands, like Lorna never even got a chance to like hold her baby. But that's horrible. And because you know that's going to break her spirit even more of like, see, you're not a good mother. You can't even tell which baby's yours. It's like, I didn't get a good enough look. You know they did that on purpose too, just to break you even more. Because the whole thing is about making you a good mother. It's like, how is any of this what they were put through making them good mothers? Like, you know, being taken away from your babies, even though, you know, studies do show, and maybe this is a more modern study, but I'm sure it's still true even back then. It was probably a well-known thing of babies need like early contact with their parents. Like that's what kind of it's part of the nurturing process, is that early bonding between the mom and child. But either way, I was like, that's garbage. And to the point, looking into Aoife, Massey and Akandi went to go visit Sister. Well, they initially wanted to get access to the church records to find out about Aoife, but they never did because she's not in the records, because the technicality of she never officially became a sister, that still using the bullshit line of the Magdalene Laundry wasn't a Magdalene Laundry. It was a training center, yada, 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 so on and so forth. And the way she's trying to spin it, like once again, that we're making these women better mothers. They weren't fit for this place. Even saying like, won't even acknowledge that it was a mom and dad, it was a mom and baby place. It's like, no, it was a laundry, and some people just weren't cut out for the work that we were putting them through. And we find out that Akandi has a similar association with the place, not to the same extent. It wasn't a full Magdalene Laundry of the same capacity, but he grew up in the mom and baby place like that. Not to that extent, but he grew up in one, so that's why he has a personal connection. And maybe that also, because he specifically was like, what did Father Percy do for this place? He's like, and she's like, he did Sunday services. And he's like, did he do this anywhere else? And she's like, oh, I'm getting a little faint. Oh, my memory isn't what it is. Can we call it a day here? It's like, right. She doesn't want to answer any questions. It's like, you are, like, you know, I'm not trying to, I can cast stones because I'm not a great human being. I'm a decent human being. Sometimes I can be a good person. Sometimes I can be a shitty person, like any other human being. But you're a next level piece of garbage where you could just like live your life after the horrendous things you did to people, for you just kind of live your life like, oh, no, everything's honky-dory, everything's fine. Especially because we got so many more details about what everyone went through. Amy's story. It's like, oh yeah, I have these nail clippers. Yeah, like while I was ironing stuff, because I was never really good at ironing, for every mistake I made, she would clip my nails closer and closer until I started bleeding on them. And then me having blood on the laundry would get me properly punished by that other nuns. I'm like, that is so fucked up. It's like, oh, let me like put you in a position to bleed. Oh, you're bleeding on the thing you're supposed to be working on, not making mistakes. Oh, that's going to make you make more mistakes, and now you're going to actually get punished, and who knows what that punishment most likely included, being beat. the sole purpose of the place, just in whatever shape or form they can, to break you down, just so they can kind of build you back up. And I don't even know if building you back up was even an end goal. They'll probably say it was, but it was just meant to. Once again, I don't understand their justification for it. Like, it still doesn't. I can't even rationalize from their perspective doing what they did, and what the reasoning, what good can come from what they did. You know. So we got, like I said, we just got that side of things with Amy. And then also we got the situation with one of the older ladies where she's like, oh yeah, here's one of the reports they would send back being like, oh yeah, like I was working certain, I forgot what it was. It was one of them was saying like she was working like 16-hour days, but they would send back these fake reports to her parents saying like, oh, you got an 86 in writing or this in math, kind of making it seem like they're actually there doing studying, and that is actually kind of almost like a learning school program, when in actuality it was just indentured servitude labor. This whole situation was a little bit of a healing process because it got Lorna an opportunity to talk to Clemens. Because maybe it is a thing of, maybe she's thinking about all this for the first time in decades, or maybe a lot of it was blocked because of trauma, but she ended up telling Clemens, like Clemens now knows the reason why Lorna sold her out all those years ago. It's like, oh, she was promised she'd get her baby back and she'd be able to leave, and obviously it all ended up being a lie because she stayed there and obviously never got her baby back. So Lorna wants to talk to her, and it's like, please, like, tell me all that you know. And obviously it's a lot for Clarence, and Clarence is like, all right, I'll tell you everything tomorrow. But as we get at the end of the episode, it seems like Clarence might have killed herself. Which also, we had that thing at the end. It's not until we were closing in on a Clemens scene that I was like, all right, the screaming, the banshee. The banshee is the omen sign of death. That death is coming type of situation. Because they even referenced the banshee in the first episode. I forgot what Massey said. It was kind of like a thing of, we might not believe in ghosts or whatever, but we know how to defend against them. I'm butchering it. It's something like that. So they're kind of bringing that back, and that's what Lorna was hearing, the banshee scream. So she had nothing to do with Clemens's death, but most likely her brother will blame her, because it's like, right, he warned, like, hey, Lorna, stay away from my sister, or I'll call the police. The last time Clemens was together with Lorna talking to her at that little meeting. Granted, they were all there. A lot of trauma came up, but specifically what Lorna said is what set her off. So it will make the argument that I think her brother's name is David. He'll probably make the argument Lorna's responsible for that. But I think this goes back to the Aoife of it all. I think what makes Clemens even more awkward around Lorna is she probably, and especially after hearing what Lorna said, Lorna's daughter, like Lorna's child, is probably still alive. I don't think her child was. I think the same might be said about Amy as well. But I think that's what that stems from. I think that's what was finally sending her over the edge, because it's the guilt of, I don't blame you anymore, Lorna. It sucks. It was all them, Sister Idly, manipulating you. I get that. It doesn't make it hurt any less, because maybe if we were able to get our children out of there, I'd be a mother right now and my child would be with me. But most likely her child died sometime afterward. Or like maybe that's the horrendous thing that she got, where it's like, hey, like, I held my baby in my arms before, like, the sisters dragged me away, cut my hair, put me on display in front of everyone. And obviously the cut to make the sting even more, they made sure the reward, quote unquote, reward Lorna for being a quote unquote good girl, because they put like a medal or something around her, being like, see what happens when she's a good girl. But obviously she got punished just like anyone else. But in this moment, it probably turned a lot of those girls at that laundry against her. Especially, it did with her and Clemens, but when they should have been together, like I think it was meant to divide them even more. So it makes you very, once again, feel isolated, like you have no place or no one to talk to or rely on. You have to kind of basically do this on your own, feel so isolated and alone. I think that's the further purpose of all of that too. She ended up running into Michael, and I love that the timing is while she's like looking up all these aspects of, oh yeah, what happens when you don't sleep? It's like, well, wild behavior, some false memories. Oh yeah, also you eat a lot of snacks. And while she's literally in the middle of eating a whole bunch of snacks, And I love like her and Michael have a chance to talk, and she's like, "You said I don't remember you, but I do." And she was like, "Yeah, I don't," because he was like, "Oh, you should take one chip and another chip, and the one flavor and like eat of a chip and another flavor of a different chip and eat them together. It's like a whole new blend. It's a whole new flavor in itself." And she's like, "You're a weird one." She's like, "I don't remember you being weird." And he's like, "But I remember you being funny." Now, I don't know if she took that as a slight, because we heard early on, like when Amy was like, "Oh, what I went through, I saw they do the same thing to you, Lorna. Why did they make you do that?" And she's like, "Because I would tell knock knock jokes because I was funny." And that's why I'm wondering, that's her association with being funny. We're like, no, I'm not funny. When she kept pressing it, like, "No, I wasn't funny." Or do you mean funny in like a, is it Goodfellas or Casino type of way? Like, whoa, what do you mean I'm funny? What do you mean by funny? Like, I don't know if it's meant to be like I don't know if it's meant to, like, how she interpreted that quote unquote usage of funny, as in like, oh, she has a negative association with it because of the Magdalene laundries, or is it just kind of a thing of like, you're trying to say I was funny, like I was an oddball or something like that, because Michael was like trying to make a point that she hasn't changed too much. And there was a place that they were supposed to go to like 30 years ago, and she's like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "Yeah, but you went home early." And that night she went home early, it's probably because her parents forced her to, and that's when she ended up getting shipped off to the Magdalene laundry. So I'm sure for her it's like, maybe I should have disregarded my parents and hung out that night. Or maybe it's just kind of like, that night I have a terrible association with being dragged off to the Magdalene laundry, so I don't look back on that time too fondly. But her and Michael went to go check out that place, and on one of the I don't know what you call it, the pillars to like one of the railings for the stairs says like Lorna and what was it, Declan. Like, I guess that's who she was dating at the time. I thought like maybe there was something between her and Michael. Maybe Michael liked her back then, but she was with Declan, and maybe some of that resurfaced. But I was like, it's a small town. There's no way you don't know. Once again, it's just that hush hush secret amongst the town. But Lorna asked about Declan, and Michael was like, "No, I haven't seen Declan in a while." She's like, "Really? You're a liar." And he's like, "Okay, he's married, 4 or 5 kids." And she's like, "Of course he is." That's where I was bringing up earlier, where I'm like, do we know Lorna's baby daddy? Because at first I was thinking, is it Michael? But I'm like, it probably would be more of a conversation between them. I think it's Declan. I think his best friend was the baby daddy, and it's kind of effed up all that she had to go through because of it, because it's like she had to suffer the ramifications for being pregnant with the dad. I don't think that ever really happens too much. It's usually, sadly, the woman ends up taking the brunt of that. I think, especially in a young teenage pregnancy, I feel like the girl takes a lot of that responsibility. Once again, I'm talking very generalization. It is a situation I should not speak so generally of. It just, basing this on TV, not even the real world. But I feel like I've seen it more so depicted that usually the girl ends up suffering the ramifications, and the dude doesn't really suffer any. And I think we see that in this instance where it's like, hey, I kind of had my entire life flipped upside down. I had my baby snatched away from me. I was abused in a multitude of ways, once again, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And yeah, here's Declan, who went on and got married and had 4 or 5 children of his own. So it cuts a even deeper. So, and obviously Lorna's being haunted by it, because the entire time she's in the house, she's just thinking about the mommy and baby rooms where all those babies were in those cradles, and it's just a lot for her. Lot of heaviness to the story in general. I figured it would be, which is like, once again, like really getting into the premise behind all of this. It's very heartbreaking and sad, and especially like the sister Eileen of it all, just like covering your tracks. I'm like, no, everyone's investigated and found out, no, it was a trading center. It wasn't what people are making it out to be, even though that's complete another horse shit. Once again, you're able to do something so evil and so heinous, and you get to just live your life and justify it like what you did was in the name of the Lord, that righteousness and goodness was on your side, when in actuality you were nothing but pure unadulterated evil. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where the next episode ultimately ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.